because they're children of the darkness.
Children of the darkness.
Hoo-hoo! Holy moly.
We made it. One more hiccup. That's it. That's all we needed was one more hiccup. That's it. We're ending season 4.
Which is so funny because like hiccups are so painful for us because we can't make ourselves burp. We share that very strange phenomenon. I feel myself getting closer to the day where I can make myself do it, but
I am not.
I like your lipstick today.
Thank you. I just bought it. I wanted to try it out. It's a little woo for me, but I'm like, let's try it.
Feels like it fits the energy of right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, real quick, can you hear the person playing trumpet?
Yes. Yeah, literally, if there's a little melody in the background, like, so be it.
Well, that's the issue. It's not a melody, which actually plays in perfectly to the theme that was coming through for me today. At least for my freak check, could be a whole freaking episode, but what do you do when the dial of dissonance is turned up?
Oh
Because
my
that is the energy right now for me.
girl, that's what's been coming through for me too.
Of course. Of
Like a
course.
whole big like a whole big rewiring and how like literally how the rewiring works. Look at this little patch of light right here. What's going on? How the rewiring works physiologically and like what we do when we're running too much dissonance. Welcome to Frequency Broads, where we have a beautiful background of Victoria's neighbor learning how to play the trumpet. We will be able to work through dissonance because apparently that is what we're being called to experience and talk about today.
And of
But
course, some
first,
PMSing. So,
oh, I just finished mine. It was so small this month, which I'm like, what's she doing, girl? But I also am like, it's okay. Energies are shifting. I'm shifting. So it just needs to kind of recalibrate a little bit. So Victoria and I tried to record on Wednesday. And as you know, we're having some difficulties. So we didn't get to record. But I did show Victoria that I made this little fortune teller with one of my students. And I used light language instead. And we picked one which was perfect for it being canceled. But I thought, Victoria, do you want to pick one today?
please.
Okay.
Um, the South one.
Okay. 1, 6, 2, or 5?
6.
1, 6, 2, or 5?
5.
All right, girl. Your fortune today is you can do this. Oh, yay! Hopefully that means we're going to work today.
We're working. We're here.
We are working. So, freak check, my dear. How art thou feeling on the day before the solstice? Because that is when we are recording it.
Oh, hold on. It's not the solstice. It's the
Oh,
solar
you're
eclipse.
right. It's a solar
It's like,
eclipse. Whatever. You know what I mean? It's all this fucking there's so much shit going on all the time in the cosmos. Like it's hard to keep up. But we got a big portal opening tomorrow. How are you feeling today?
well, I feel like when you live in a world that we're operating in where there are portals opening up every single second, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. And so I'm kind of looking at this frenzy around the eclipse as a cool. I'm glad people are interested in something outside of like media or
Mm-hmm.
drama or the superficial shit and are looking outward towards the cosmos. But it also has me thinking a lot about our attention and how we
Mm-hmm.
give away our energy through attention
Mm-hmm.
and having a big old reset talk with myself in terms of what is needing to go and what is working also. But it's mostly the things that like bubble up to the surface that are like, All right. Thank you for serving me. Thank you for your time. Good day.
Mm.
So I'm feeling a lot of kind of big closures taking place.
Mhm.
But I feel ready for them. I also trust so deeply that space will be made for bigger and better things of resonance to enter my life. So
Fuck
just
yeah.
rolling with the punches. It hurts and is beautiful all at the same time. So But I
Uh,
told Tara this morning, I'm like, it feels like my heart is sobbing. Like that's the energy
mm,
that I feel, this like
mm,
very like Baba Yaga sounds when it come out, that like
mm,
primordial.
mm,
Feel
mm,
like I'm
mm.
channeling Megan right now.
Yeah.
um, a lot of Magdalene energy, stories, downloads coming through. The
Mm,
mother,
the
the Holy
mother.
Spirit. The Holy Spirit is going strong. And I have just like, how badass is it that it's not father, mother, son? It is Holy Spirit. Like, for the longest time, I kind of was like, how rude, and
Oh.
they avoided the use of the word mother, but I'm sort of reclaiming it in my own belief of it, that the Holy Spirit is just as badass as them saying the mother. It just kind of detoured many of us for hundreds of years from the
Yeah.
truth of the matter. So shout out to the Holy Spirit, aka the mother.
Mm,
Love
mm,
you.
mm, 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 mm. I never thought of it that way because you're right. I thought the same thing. I'm like, where the fuck's the mom? And I'm like, oh, she's way above y'all. That's what's happening.
How are you, my dear? Freak check.
I'm feeling really good today. I got a lot of downloads this morning about the eclipse, as I was mentioning to you earlier. Very similar things. Today is the day to wrap it up, put a good bow on it, and get ready to move on. We talked about last episode, I think, about how we're entering a frequency where we can kind of transmute a lot faster. So I think these things have been coming up with eclipse season or in Mercury in retrograde, and they're not even necessarily for you to like, this is what you need to work on and this is where your attention needs to be, but just to be like, get it up and out, like get it, like we're done, and like the opportunity for you to choose differently, which is really what's coming through for me, is the conscious choice to choose something differently. And I'll get to that a little bit later because it's a little bit more in depth than that. But for me today has just been about like setting the foundation for what's to come on Monday starting tomorrow, what's to come with eclipse tomorrow, for the year, for the month, just like what I want to change and shift and set those foundations for. A great example of how something bubbles up and I'm choosing to do something differently with it is this past week, or maybe even a little bit longer, the little eating disorder thoughts and habits have been coming back up. I actually like spoke to Andrew about it yesterday and was like crying and was like, "Oh my god," like just feeling back in that space again, which I haven't felt in a long time, and like hearing those voices again, and being able to like say it out loud instead of like keeping it trapped in my brain and just like thinking about it and mulling it over and just being like, uh, and like just being able to talk to Andrew and be like, hey, if I say this out loud, then it's really happening, which means I have to do something about it, as opposed to like feeling shameful for it and keeping it to myself and just reliving that narrative. And was able to very quickly shift and be like, no, I don't want to like not eat. I want to like work out again. I want to eat really healthy. I want to like, clearly the eating disorder thoughts are coming up because I'm not taking care of myself. Those are the times when it comes up, not because my body looks a certain way, although that does play a factor, but it's really when I'm not taking care of myself. So instead of getting into the avoidant habits of taking care of myself by just like not eating, it's setting those foundations and choosing something differently. So I'm going to start pray for me. I'm going to start waking up like super early to work out, like at like 5 or 5:30, which I'm like, "Oof, that's going to be rough, but I'm going to do it." You guys are going to hold me accountable because it's going to happen. Um, so I'm just feeling really motivated, really good. The other thing that came through was just we're closing things out because this opportunity, this portal, yes, there's portals all the time, all over the place. You can open a portal in the middle of nowhere, doing whatever you want. We have the power to do that, but this is an opportunity for us to collapse timelines, close karmic cycles, and step into something new. So, just really looking forward to closing out all the ties today. So that way, tomorrow, it's like I'm waking up in a completely new reality. Here's my very intentional reality that I'm placing in and stepping into and taking action to uphold and facilitate.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. That takes a
Thank you.
lot of courage and mm, foresight,
Hmm.
courage and clarity, and woof, girl. All right, we're holding you to it.
Yes, hold me to it. I'm going to be listening to my body, but I'm still going to be intentionally moving again and like eating 3 meals a day and like have them be healthy meals a day. We got this, right? That was our fortune. You got this. We got this. I also just want to say one more thing. I have been feeling very grateful for this community. Victoria and I hit 50 subscribers. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's not a lot to the world, but
On
it's
YouTube, on
so,
YouTube.
yeah, yeah, yeah. On YouTube, on YouTube. I know it's not a lot to the world, but it is a lot to us and it means so much. And we know that we're small and, we're trucking along and we really appreciate that you've been here with us. Or if you're new, we appreciate you joining us. Um, it's been a journey and it's just going to continue to shift and mold into something new and more aligned as we shift into something new every fucking day. um
Yeah.
so I just wanted to offer my gratitude because I know that we're small and the fact that you're with us and sticking with us really means so much to us. And also thanks for sticking with us because I was thinking about how we used to run the first couple seasons and it was very like almost teachy. And now
Yeah.
we're just like, now I just hop on. I'm like, hey, so I saw through time, right? And we're just like jumping right in. So I appreciate that it may go over your heads here and there, but that you stick with us and that you open your heart and your soul to us so that way it can activate something in you because that's what we're here to do. So thank you.
I second that. Thank you. Thank you. Wrapping up this fourth season very much feels like there are parallels between our fourth season and the fourth dimension. And to me, the fourth
Mm.
dimension feels very like a stepping stone or this in between. It could be at times very much the void. Um, and so I know that it's not always of resonance what we're talking
Mhm.
about, but hopefully there's a little something that still activates whatever it is inside of you, or you just practice tuning voices out, which I think a lot of people do that when they listen to podcasts. Isn't that interesting? They just like the sound of people's voices and
Yeah.
it makes them feel a certain way. So I'm sort of been like wanting to play with my frequency, the frequency of my voice. And when we went to
Mm.
record on Wednesday, my voice was so deep and like sultry. And I'm like, what is
Mm.
happening? So let's see how this turns out today.
And if you haven't yet subscribed or followed or whatever, we would appreciate that you did. That's what we call prescribing to our frequency. So we'd very much appreciate it so we can continue to grow and continue to offer more to you because we love what we do, even for our small community. So thank you for being here.
And speaking of offers, our dear friend, High Priestess Christina, has offered a 20% off discount for her services. And her offerings are unlike any type of energy work, remote energy work I've experienced. It is so
Mm-hmm.
subtle and sweet and to the point. And I feel like it really kind of gets in there and does the work. And yes, you do have to show up and you have to be open to it and you have to prepare your vessel for it and of course take the time to integrate after. But compared to other types of energy work I've had, this is the most mm, energetically sophisticated, I would say. And it
Mm.
really does feel like it's the way we're all going to be healing in the very near future. So if you're interested in checking it out, we'll include the link below along with the code. And yeah, happy energetic emotional healing to you.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned how powerful it is remotely because she resides in Florida and I did a session with her in person and virtually. And all in all, the same experience, what she's capable of doing is so powerful. So, with everything that's been bubbling up, with this opportunity to close chapters, to just like change and shift the narrative that you have been upholding for so long, like just I really recommend working with Christina. I know there's other great healers out there, but not only is she fantastic, but she's offering a discount. And I don't know if I've said my motto here, not that it really suits my motto, but my motto is if it's free, it's for me, right? So if it's a discount, fucking take it. Like get on it. And it's only for April.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you reach out to her soon. She said that the appointment itself can be later than April, but you need to book it to get that discount. So we'll leave that below. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
Whew.
Deep breaths.
Whew. So what are we getting at today? I mean, why don't you expand on what came through about dissonance, and then I can share a little bit more about what came through for me about choosing to rewire the dissonance.
I love that. I actually want to ask you a question before we begin.
Let's do it.
Do you fear the power inside or outside of you more?
Ooh. Oh shit. That's a really good question. I think at this stage in my game, I would fear the outside energy more than my inside energy. I think for a long time I was fearful of my inside energy, like my inner energy and what I was capable of, because when I tapped into it, it was so fucking chaotic and I didn't know how to use it. And it was so powerful and like actually brought more harm to me than good because I was just like not being intentional with it and not like understanding what I was doing. But at this point in my practice, after honing in these skills, because that's ultimately what it is, it's skills, I feel really confident in being able to like wield the power. Is it yield or wield? It's yield.
You.
Or is
What
yield
does
like
we?
stopping?
No, yield is like slow down.
Yeah. Okay. So it must be yield. Go along the journey of Tara learning the English language. But I can now like control my energy. So I would say maybe the external energies are more fearful. But even that feels like a lie because I'm like, I know how powerful I am. So I'm not fearful of what's outside of me.
Well, I kind of figured and had hoped that you would say outside of us because the biggest theme over the last several months has been how much do I let other people's decisions affect my personal experience?
Mm,
And it's really forced me to sit with the idea that we all long to merge with one another.
mm,
And that connection is so vital to our existence as humans and being in community and feeling like you're a part of this world and collective in some way. And so I think the trickiest part about it is what does it look and feel like to unmerge? Because it's very natural and easy for many of us
ooh.
to merge on various degrees, right? Like some of us
Mhm.
are very deep and soulful, and that's the only way we're like gonna merge with another human is like we're gonna
Yeah.
go soul deep. And I'm not talking in sex, could be intimacy, but I'm just talking like how are you showing up and connecting with
Mhm.
another person, and what part of your body do you really kind of feel like is anchoring in that connection? um, and then the unmerging part gets really tricky when sex is involved, or even just the merging of your hearts and your minds, because we
Mm,
tend to pick up on other people's thoughts and use them as inspiration, and they sometimes sort of become our own. We see
mm,
this often in media, right? Where like sayings or phrases, or we carry forth that vibration of a phrase or word. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that's been my biggest problem in relationships is that the capacity to say, "Hey, I support you and your own experience." And to
Mhm.
what degree do my boundary like that's always been my struggle is like my boundaries get so fuzzy when it
Mhm.
comes to like what will I tolerate or not tolerate. And you know, always comes back to what I preach about, which is other people and their sovereignty. And
Mhm.
of course, this thing talking about media and phrases or memes or whatever that keep popping up. There's this one that's like, you can always tell how much a woman respects herself by the man that she dates. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, I felt like such a little slap in the face because I'm like, fuck,
Mm.
that's so true. Who you associate yourself with reflects so much of the perception, yes, but your energetic footprint,
Yeah.
your, you know, of the footprint being placed upon you too. So
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think it's two things, right? Well, first of all, the getting unmerging. I love that word of merging because that's what we are trying to do. We're trying to merge ourselves, right? We compartmentalize ourselves with our traumas and our this and our that and like or masculine or family, yeah, feminine trying to merge itself, but we are trying to merge with one another. And I think it's easier to unmerge when you're running things through your field instead of your body, like we were saying last time. So that's why Victoria is so adamant, and I am as well, but like really talks to being intentional with who we give our body to, because it's so much harder to unmerge, to separate once it's in the body. And if we can work on keeping things in our field instead of our body, it's not that it's just going to be like a bye, but like it'll be a little bit of distance so that way you can kind of just clean your field and get rid of that. Um, and another thing that came up for me when you were talking was like the boundaries and like what you're willing to tolerate. And I think what a lot of people need to remember is that when we validate other people's journey, sovereignty, experiences, that's not devaluing our own, nor should it cross our boundaries. So someone separate from me, living their life, going on their journey, experiencing theirs, I don't need to devalue it. I don't need to say, oh, you're lower vibration, you don't understand, or you need to do all this healing trauma work. Like, have at it. Like, do your thing. Maybe you are doing the work and that's why it's so adamant in your field right now. Like, who am I to
so
judge?
true.
Right? Who am I to judge? But also, I'm allowed to have boundaries and say, hey, you don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to do anything, but you can't talk to me that way. Or you can't, like, I need a certain level of respect, or I have this boundary on this thing. So it's still able to have those boundaries while validating, because boundaries are about you, not other people. And I think as someone who's a people pleaser, we tend to think that our boundaries are there to aid everyone involved, and that's not true. Boundaries are for yourself. The way we respond to each other's boundaries and set boundaries involve everyone, but they're for you. So they're still okay to have and honor someone's sovereignty.
So much easier said than done.
Oh, for fucking sure. Then I go to work and I'm like, what the fuck's your problem?
I know we've been talking about that a lot lately, that whole idea of not shaming someone for being at a totally different like frequency or playing field than you, like perpetuating the shame around their level of consciousness is so cruel and counterproductive to holding space or even witnessing someone else's
Mhm.
evolution. And so I really do have to check myself, like talk about spiritual ego. That's like the very
Mhm.
inflamed spiritual ego that's like really it's so fucking gross to me. I'm like, I don't even like my throat is like, "Mm, let's just stop talking. Let's talk about better things."
Yeah. Well, I think that leads into like what I wanted to share too, because when people are on their journey, living their life, it invokes and triggers us and our perspective of what we've been through in our trauma and whatever, and then we tend to like respond and react and become judgmental towards this other person. Now if they're hurting you, like, yeah, respond, react, like I get, or I should say react, not respond, but you have a right to say something if they're treating you poorly. You can set those boundaries, but it's about not judging the other person for where they're at. This is their capacity of whatever, love, communication, whatever at that moment that they're willing to do. And I think the way that or one avenue, I should say, that we can take when we want to release that judgment of others and that spiritual ego is rewiring our physiological body to how we respond to these triggers.
I literally just this morning got an Instagram ad that said, like, it's like a betrayal account. And it's like, what to do when your triggers arise based on like your betrayal. And it was talking about
Oh.
how it activates your amygdala. And it's
Uh-huh.
basically like your internal, like, fire alarm system. So,
Yes.
a scent, a place, a date, like any type of memory activates this internal fire alarm. And so that's when the trigger is activated. And so it like
Yes.
often has nothing to do with what's happening in the present moment. And so then returning to that initial trauma and sitting in that and like almost like choosing a different script. And that's the thing. Like the scripts
Yes.
of DNA are always constantly running, right? And so you get to choose which script you're going to activate and play out. And so going
Yes.
back and not to negate your trauma and the pain that taught you and led you to this point, but then being able to go back to that past self. Um, it's an interesting place to be in this present moment and to be able to navigate to the past
Mhm.
and the future and knowing when to make the conscious choice to go either direction because it's not always serving you if you're constantly in one place or the other.
Yes.
But when you're in this present moment and then being like, I'm going to go to the past for this specific moment, and here's my agenda, and here's what we're going to do, knowing you come back to the present moment and it may not change things significantly, but you still had the courage to go back to something that is very much affecting your present moment. So it is
Mhm.
one step in the right direction. It just seems very and that's I think how our minds have to structure this thought
Yes.
is in a linear way, right? To be able to make those jumps, but it's all
Yeah.
happening.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's kind of the precursor to what I was getting, right? So the precursor meaning you need to find what that trauma was, you need to sit with that trauma, you need to work with it, right? But let's say for those who have been doing the healing work, for those who know like that trigger came up and like, oh, I know where that comes from, my betrayal, my abandonment, my whatever, whatever, right? And we have this conscious awareness of it now, but it still requires a rewiring, a recircuit of our literal response, like our fight or flight, our amygdala, like the way that adrenaline and cortisol and hormones run through our bodies. And the way that I like to think of it is, you know, your brain is a muscle. And if we're not working it out, if we're not using different parts of it, if we're not activating different parts of it or using different muscles, then we're just going to keep doing the same thing, right? We're just going to keep running the same programs or responding or sending out the same hormones when we're introduced to that trigger. So, something, and you can slow me down because I feel like I'm just going to like bleh, word vomit this right now.
Let's see. I think I'm gonna just like get comfortable.
Get comfortable for it. What came to me was first the concept of emotions and feelings, right? Emotion is the physiological response that we get to an external stimuli. So when something's happening outside in our world, when something we're a part of, whatever, sends those hormones through our body, our heart's rating, heart is racing, our fight or flight is like taking form. We're thinking like sweating, shaking, whatever, however your body responds to these triggers. Now that's going to happen instantaneously. That's not something that we consciously get to choose at the beginning. What happens is we tend to then make our decision when we're in that heightened activation and we're running from that emotion or that feeling. And the feeling is the story, is the narrative, right? Like this is happening. And the feeling is I'm sad because this happened to me in my past and blah, 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 right? That piece you just said, which is a piece we need to know. But when we can leave the feeling behind, the thought behind, and just say, hold on, I'm experiencing an emotion, a physiological response. Let me, now this is after you've already done your understanding of yourself. You've listened to the emotion. You know what it's telling you. You know the story. This is in real life when we're at work and we get triggered. The emotion rises. It's using those nervous system regulators to regulate our body before making a decision, before making a choice. Do I want, okay, my fight or flight came in. Is this actually a threat? If it is, let's fucking use this emotion and get the fuck out of here or get myself safe. Or is this just from my past? Am I re-triggering something from my past? Now I can kind of calm my nervous system and make a choice based on what's my current reality. When we do that repetitively, right? If my trigger is one of my triggers was Andrew telling me what to do, right? So if Andrew, every time he tells me what to do, I move from a place of emotion and feeling, and I'm like, bah, and like, oh, fight or flight, I'm fighting, like, nope, we're not going to let this happen again because remember what happened when somebody had control of you in the past. Like, we're not going to let that happen. Then every time it happens, that's how I'm going to respond. Versus if over time I'm practicing when Andrew says something that I feel is controlling, I regulate myself first no matter what happens after. What I'm training my body to do is not get dysregulated when that happens. I am literally recalculating and rewiring my brain. So the next time Andrew does something like that, I'm almost immediately going to get in this regulated state because that's what I'm training my body to do. When this trigger happens, I'm regulated. And over time, we actually get to rewire that, which restructures our DNA, restructuring the epigenetics of what we've gotten from our lineage. And we're now not passing that down to our children to say, oh my God, I've coded my DNA for any time this happens, I get triggered and I respond in this way. Versus I'm going to rewire everything. So when this trigger comes up, there may be a physiological response, but it's either going to be smaller or shorter. And I can work through it and rewire it and make the conscious choice to do something different. Or if my reality needs it, do the same thing. And then you start to train your body to really learn what's a threat and what's not a threat.
What a fun little science experiment that takes practice and is probably accessible to you every single day of your existence until the day you die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like it'll be less work as time goes on and you're able to tune in. But not to say it's not going to take you going to the depths of your pain and trauma in the moments and really practicing self control of your
Yes.
mind, of your
Yes.
reaction. Um,
Because if you don't, or I should say, if you don't know where the original trigger is,
ooh,
then you're not able to tell yourself that we're safe in this moment because it's just like, oh, well, what would be the difference from the last time, right? That
yeah.
tells me that I am safe. So it does require you to go internal. And like if you're at the start of this process and you're starting to recognize your triggers, like can you go in work and have and be triggered and be like, actually, I got to meditate and go meet my younger self and figure out? No. But if you learn regulating practices, then you can at least regulate and give and choose, make that conscious choice when you're home, when you're in a sacred space, when you have the time to say, okay, now that I'm actually regulated and I have the time and space, let me go inward. Let me go and like dissect this emotion and this trigger. Let me really think about, well, what happened? Why did I respond that way? What other times in my life have I responded? Is there a core memory that I forgot about? Those kinds of things need to happen first.
Mm.
But now that everything's running fast and you're like, right, you do your healing journey, which will be forever. um, and then you learn regulating strategies. You're running things through your field instead of your body. So this thing happens, your body starts to react, but it's not in your body. Your body's just reacting to the field outside yourself. And you're able to be like, "Phew, I feel you. Let's get this out of my field. Let's regulate. Let me choose from a state of higher consciousness, from a state of clarity, from a state of stillness, instead of highly activated choices."
It sure does seem to give you the opportunity to free up space in the intelligence of your heart and the other energy
Mm-hmm.
centers in your body to go on and do other things other than transmute
Yes.
your situations, even though I'm that definitely has its time and place. So, not to say once it makes it past the filter and into your body, that work doesn't also have to be done. But
Correct.
I think one of the points here is like from our womb to our heart to our third eye, these centers are meant to be focusing and accessing different activities other than
Mm.
the pain and frustration and everything being filtered through you from another person's experience with you to you for you.
Yes. Yes. And it brings you to a state of like, which is the word that keeps coming to me over and over, freedom.
Mm.
Because now you're not locked in this cage of your traumas. You're not being swayed one side or the other from people around you. You are solid, you are sovereign, you are free to choose. You're not, because it's almost like when we have these triggers and these narratives in our head, then we're not free. We're making choices that we don't want to make. We're self sabotaging. We're living in disharmony. We're reliving these traumas over and over and over and over. And it's like, what? We can choose something different. We can be free to choose something different, but you need to free yourself by detaching from trying to control others and their responses, from being able to play with time and hop back in and say, maybe I didn't stop that trauma from happening, but I'm reworking my body to not respond similarly when I'm introduced to, you know, a trigger. You
Mm.
have much more freedom.
I think I've just watched so many people for so long avoid. And I
Mhm.
think what we're saying right now could be interpreted as avoidance to some degree. And I wish I could be someone who avoided more. I can't. Like, I
Yeah.
fucking feel it all. So, yeah. Do I have a point other than
Well, it's a balance.
I specifically am thinking about one genre or type of this archetype of woman
Mhm.
who I've witnessed ignore, and I never ever understood why. And I, for the longest time, thought it was a loss of their power or that they were in denial or that they were, but it is like the primary woman in a relationship when a man is unfaithful, when a man who says he, is married or in a supposedly committed relationship with a woman, that woman in that
Mhm.
role. And
Mhm.
often that man will turn to his mistress or the other woman and confide in her all of this insight into his relationship with his wife or significant other as a way to form trust and that weird, strange connection
Mhm.
that bonds the third party. And I've always just thought, oh my gosh, why is like the wife has to know the other woman exists and like,
Mhm.
why is she ignoring it? And to me, I think it's often like a woman who is done giving her power away to a man making his own mistakes and being selfish. Like that's ultimately what
Mhm.
it is,
Mhm.
and relying on external validation because we as women have so much intelligence within our womb space and our heart
Mhm.
space. And not to say men can't have that same level. I just think men have been distracted or taken down a really far off
Mhm.
path. And women have been forced to refind this path for them, given our historical situations. And so right now, I'm really wanting to see this like reclamation of the masculine energy taking responsibility for external validation, pleasure, just
Mm.
anything outside of themselves, because there's also this gray fuzzy area of the masculine thinking that they're this like safety security provider, but they can't even sit there and fucking look themselves in the mirror. So sit down. I'm like, sit down and face it. Sit down and look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yes. I think women tend to look outside for validation, but I think we've learned that we're only going to get devalued when we look outside because society wants us to look a
Whew.
certain way or act a certain way. So we've come to this space. Hopefully, a lot of us are coming to this space where external validation isn't as juicy, because it's not, as internal validation. And I think because of the distractions and purposely put there for men. I'm not blaming men. It was done intentionally for you
Yes,
to be
yes.
distracted, for you not to know your power, because if you don't know your power, then you can't create a container for the feminine to really receive her power, and for you to mend your power so she can show you, how do we look inside? How do we find that validation? How do you activate this internal power and source of wisdom that everyone has, because we all hold all of these archetypes. um, but I think it's really important to come back to your point about avoiding, is this concept of rewiring and not getting triggered is not, it does sound like avoidance, but it is not to avoid. It's for you to come to a place of stillness in order for you to actually see what's happening in your reality. And if your reality is that you're being betrayed, well, you fucking put a boundary and you either leave or have these discussions or whatever it is, because everything new is nuanced. But really looking at calming the nervous system so that way you're seeing the reality. Because what happens when we are triggered is we're actually, speaking about being able to bop around time, we're actually merging timelines. When we are triggered, we are simultaneously existing in this reality and the reality of where the original trigger came from. So when you're able to calm your nervous system, it's not ignoring what that trigger brought up for you, but it's facing your actual current reality in this timeline to say, is there a need for change, external or internal? Because when we're activated, there's a need for change in some way. That activation isn't wrong. It's like you said, the alarm system. So is it something that internal needs to change because you need healing work, because whatever, or is it external, this relationship, this job, whatever? But we don't get to make that conscious choice when we're too highly activated. So it's
Holy
grounding
moly.
in. Yeah, it's grounding in. It's coming back to this timeline because you're in all three. You really are. You're in
Yeah.
this current reality. You're being triggered from your past and you're thinking about how this trigger is going to affect your future. Can I be with a man like this? Can I really blah, blah, blah? It's like you're thinking about what your future will look like while you're facing this current issue and you're being triggered from your past. So merge those timelines, be present, and come back to this one and say, okay, what's actually happening and what needs to change? Is it internal or external?
What a beautiful way to display your power is to
Yes.
harness in all of those timelines. And that question, is it internal or external? If we just had the ability to tune into that part of ourselves, the world would be such a different place if that's
Yes.
where the focus was.
Yes. And that's why they keep us moving like this with our 9 to 5, with social media, because when you're moving too fast, you don't get to slow down and be in that position to do that, to really tap into our
Mhm.
power, to really be paying attention to what timeline you're running and where you're existing. Because I could bet you right now, if you're conscious enough to understand this, then you could really think back to times where you were living an entire day not in this timeline, when you were living an entire day as your wounded inner child,
Mm.
as your angry inner teen. And you were running that timeline on top of this one. You were running work like a little baby. You know what I mean? Like you're like,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's a bad thing, but it's being conscious to choose, being grounded and regulated enough to choose how you're going to walk with all of these components happening at once.
What's interesting, we're talking about all of this right now because we're smack dab in the middle of Mercury retrograde, which is all about resetting and looking to the past and using the past to determine your future. And
Mhm.
that's really the heart of Mercury retrograde, is taking that pause to rest and reflect, all the re's, right? So, mm,
And I think that avoidant piece comes because, and this is something that I've been really thinking about lately, and I know you're fucking on it with me, is that this swing of like avoidance and hyper vigilance of our trauma. And like, we
ooh,
don't need to be in either fucking capacity all the time. There are times where, like, humans being humans, you got to avoid something for a moment because you can't just break down in the middle. I can't just, well, I say I can't break down in the middle of teaching students, but the amount of times I had a child say to me, because I was like fake crying once, and they go, I know your real cry. You've cried so much. And I'm like, damn it, you're right. Like, but not most people are as lucky as I, where I can have my full forum of emotions, not feelings, but emotions, that physiological
mm,
response, that I'm able to do that in current reality in real time. But there are times where we need to avoid for a moment and get shit done. I can only imagine as a mother, there are times where you need to be like, girl, get it together. Your kid needs you right now. Um, and there are times where we need to go in and be hyper vigilant and really be looking at our traumas in it. But most of the time, we should be right in the middle. Most of the time, we should be having that movement from side to side where we're really thinking about, how can I, yeah, just kind of float in the middle and not avoid things all the time, but also not fucking live. Oh, that's where I was going. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Um, with Mercury retrograde, right? The super spiritual people are constantly talking about it, as we are too, from this lens of like, get ready. Like, oh, and girl, I said it, what, last episode or the episode before with the eclipse? Like, get ready. Here it comes. Like, oh my God, like all these terrible things are going to come up, which makes people avoid because they're like, I need to shut down. I need to close down. Like, this is going to be big energies. All these bad things are going to be coming up. But it's like, no, dude, it's such a beautiful thing. Let them rise, because what you're doing is you're still perpetuating the same programming because it's coming up and you're facing it with fear. You're not facing it with acceptance. You're not facing it with knowledge. You're not facing it with love. You're sitting there and you're saying, I need to avoid, I need to hide, I need to flight, I need to get the fuck out of there, as opposed to just being like, oh, look at this situation. This brought something up for me. What a great opportunity to choose something different. Or
mm.
what a great opportunity to set a boundary because this is not okay.
Feel like we're about done. So
That's
go
what I'm
do
feeling
that.
too.
Go do all that.
Go do all that,
But
because
don't do
then you'll have,
anything at the same time.
wait, that's so funny because when I was pulling cards for this episode, the two cards that came out were action and stillness. So it's simultaneously taking that moment of stillness, that calm, that trust in life, let go of control, and then taking conscious direct action is your next step with confidence and patience. We should not be moving when we're highly activated, not physically moving, but like moving on our path when we're highly activated. Use that as a point of reflection, as a point of grounding, as a point of transmutation. Then we take the action.
I love your I love your combination.
Transmutation,
Transmutation.
whatever. You guys know what I mean. If you're here, you know what I mean.
Wait, I also want to share real quick what card I got. I got the Nine of Wands, the Unseen, and the Star. And I'm pretty sure it was the one tied to Nine of Wands where I was like, this totally aligns with what we're talking about. Although this path is long and winding, my focus remains clear.
Hmm.
And then I like this part. It jumps down and to say, when in doubt, throw it out. Your space is sacred. When you navigate the energetic, physical, and emotional fields around you, it is important to discern what is healthy and what is not. And I feel like that is
Mm.
so the energy of the season right now.
Yes.
Endurance requires watching, listening, both inwardly and outwardly. You don't need to use energy that you don't have and that you can't afford to waste. Remember that there is refuge in nature. If you need a recharge, bring yourself home.
Mm, I love that so much.
Me
And you're
too.
so right. That is exactly the energy right now. This is coming out right after the eclipse. Let this be your portal for a new life. Let this be your opportunity for freedom and pleasure and sovereignty and liberation. Allow these things to rise and get them throw them out. Throw them out if you don't need them. Say bye
Bye.
because we're ready for something bigger and greater, and it's coming and it's happening. And don't let the fear mongering of the media or those around you to really take away from the power that you have, because you get to create this new life. You get to create this new chapter. The path may be winding, but you stay calm and confident moving forward.
Tune in next week for our last episode of the season before we take a little break. And then we will be in person together. Alas, we'll have
Yes.
guests. It's going to be so good. This is next level. We are so grateful for this opportunity in space. And it's going to just keep getting better, baby.
So we will see you next week in our new reality. And we love you all.
Love you.